2 months ago I made this video about how I learned to make games in Scratch. It wasn't pretty. These first few years are a cesspool of unfun games and unfunny animations, where I made new account after new account to try and escape the cycle of mediocrity. We ended that video off with a glimmer of hope, a new account called Scratch the Greatest, a new philosophy of quality over quantity, and a certain game that changed everything. You saw the title. This is the game that started me on the path to fame. Kinda. So what was that game and what made it so special? A little context here. It's 2017 and I'm about to enter 7th grade, but like any 11-year-old with several months of free time, I was really bored. So I decided, what if, instead of making another soulless Minecraft clone or attempted comedy, I spent some time learning something new about Scratch. So I made a game called Bob the Bee. You control Bob not with the arrow keys, but using your mind. Hands. You control Bob using your hands, which was possible thanks to the webcam feature in Scratch. But to me, this felt like telekinesis. You have to remember, this was before Beat Saber. VR was not mainstream. So this project fascinated me so much that I decided to invest a little extra effort, spend a few days on the game instead of a few hours. Playing Bob the Bee now, it's not all that special. You move Bob around with your hands, have him dodge these UFOs that spit bullets, and shove these sharks off screen. But there's a level of polish and completeness that's not present in any of my earlier games. For example, I added achievements. The game gets harder as you go on. The thumbnail is kinda spiffy. This game didn't make me famous, but it was something I could be proud of. And that's what started a whole new era for me. The era continued with my next game, made a few days later, called Change or Danger. This one's more simple than Bob the Bee, but it's just as polished. That's also a sign that I'm focusing on a basic arcadey core and building a full game around that, rather than trying to make the next RPG epic. I also decided to try making some original music for it, not with OpenMPT, but with a software called Organia, made by the creator of Cave Story, an indie game from 2004. Since it didn't have MP3 export, I fudged it by playing the music from my PC speaker and recording it with the microphone. This let me overdub my voice on top of it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I would continue my trend of arcadey simplicity with the next game, Infinite Insanity, which I updated to be multiplayer while accidentally forgetting to keep the one-player mode. Whoops. Even with that mishap though, I was becoming confident in my ability to make these fast-paced, bite-sized games. Also, remember that spiffy thumbnail from Bob the Bee? Well, I had decided to brand all my new projects with that style of thumbnail, which actually motivated me to work harder on my games. I wanted each new project to be worthy of that white and gray badge of honor. Confident in this new brand, I would introduce more variety into my projects. Physics Tweaks 1 was an okay educational sandbox. I've Made a Terrible Discovery is one project I'm not very proud of today. A really clickbaity, half-satire slideshow about how Scratch is supposedly shutting down in 20 years. It certainly worked though, being my most viewed project so far, even if it attracted some criticism. Pen Artist was a quick little paint program. Fun to doodle with, but you won't find me painting the next Mona Lisa with it. Besides these experiments, I also started to make some more ambitious games. Tucker's Traverse, the first platformer I made on this account, is a unique mechanic where gravity is reversed if you're on the top half of the screen. This has some neat effects, like on this level where you have to hop across some rocks while staying low to the ground so you don't fly upwards to your doom. The game also ends with a boss fight that's so difficult I had to cheat and increase my health. That won't be a problem for most people though, since there's an impossible level before it. Pixel Pets, a pet simulator, is cute, albeit very basic. At this point, I'd fallen into a pretty good groove. I put out Physics Tweaks 2, which doesn't have any physics in it, but is at least nice to look at. The Scam is the first animation on this account since Joe Rider, my ill-fated attempt at an episodic series. This time, instead of building an overarching plot, I just made a lighthearted animation using audio from a TED Talk. Luckily, the person in the talk is much funnier than me, so this actually works pretty well. There's a lesson here. Play to your strengths. I did the animation, someone else did the writing, and it turned out great. We'll see that lesson again in the future. STG Shots is a 2-player shootout, featuring characters from all my previous games. I tried out even more genres. XO Oh No is a completely code-based game. No graphics at all, just the built-in list view in Scratch. It's a fun experiment, but the performance updates in Scratch 3.0 make it impossible to play today. It's like how today's computers are so fast that the turn speed in Lego Island is jacked up. B&B Hat Factory is a clicker game building on the universe of Infinite Insanity. You can really see the improvement over my last clicker game, Civil War Clicker. Foosy is actually a very interesting idea. Several rounds of foosball-based combat that you have to complete within a time limit. As you can see, I was diversifying my genres at this point, but the quality of the games was improving pretty slowly. Now though, we reached what I consider to be a turning point, Change or Story. At this point, I was getting better at coding, and I was able to make a more advanced platformer with dialogue, a shield system, and a unique damage mechanic where you get knocked back to the previous level level instead of just restarting the current screen. This game also saw some popularity since it was liked by Will Lamb, the premier game creator on Scratch. From there we have a few more boring projects, a new intro, an educational series, but then one interesting development, a new account. This might signal some warning bells if you saw the other Scratch video, but have no fear. This isn't a replacement for Scratch the Greatest. The account name is Second Greatest. It's just an alt account for sharing demos and other projects that don't necessarily fit the Scratch the Greatest brand. One of these demos, Boss Fight Maker, got a bit of attention, and it actually ended up doing better than the finished project. This ended up happening with a few different demos, and I'll never understand why. Back on the main account, I had begun to work on some more coding-intensive projects. Game Show Gary is basically 2D Portal, made by someone who had never played Portal before. I also made a level editor for it later on. Here's an AI obstacle course that uses something almost like evolutionary simulation. It can actually navigate simple obstacle courses, but it takes an eternity to learn. But notice this in the description. I'm probably not going to get famous, so I'll make things that are fun to make instead of the general crowd pleasers. That's a sign that I'm finally heading down the right path. Don't try to get famous by making the best projects, just make the best projects you can because it's fun. To that end, I would then make my first fan game, Super Mario Odyssey Arena, which lets you use Cappy to possess enemies in a 2D environment. Although I'm not sure if I'd actually played Mario Odyssey when making the game. Regardless, it's kind of fun and it even got some views, which, oh no. I immediately went back into fame mode and tried to make a project to capitalize on my newfound popularity, Flash Run, which is a simplistic, unfun mobile game that's not even mobile compatible. The only upside to this game is that I got rid of the old gray and white thumbnail design, which was starting to become more of a relic than a badge of honor. Knowing when to break from your brand is just as important as developing your brand in the first place. But then, something big happens in the Scratch world. A new development that I wasn't quite a fan of. Scratch 3.0 was a relatively minor update in the grand scheme of things. Most of the changes were to the project editor, this thing. Blocks were larger and more pastel colored. Some elements are rearranged, and projects run a lot faster thanks to using HTML5 instead of Flash. But for whatever reason, I hated it. Probably because it looked a bit too child-friendly. I still hold this view that the blocks in 3.0 have just a bit too much padding, and the editor is a bit too zoomed in, as if we can't handle having more than a few lines of text on the screen. But I can live with it these days. Back then, though, I was furious, and I looked for any way out, eventually settling on downloading the old Scratch 2.0 offline editor and making all my projects that way, then uploading them to the website. I even made a guide called How to Go Back to Scratch 2.0. It's supposed to be comical, but my humor hadn't improved since the Joe Ryder days. Kinda makes me wonder, have I ever been funny? No. Anyway, using the 2.0 offline editor forced me to stare at my own projects instead of browsing the Scratch website itself, and I guess this acted as some sort of productivity boost for me because my next project is a banger. Deck Dojo was my entry to a game contest, and the competitive aspect motivated me even further to come up with a fun premise and actually see it through to completion. So, Deck Dojo is a beat-em-up featuring a gauntlet of increasingly fierce enemies that randomly drop these cards. Pressing space lets you play the card, which acts like a special attack. These little pixies give you a card that lets you dash forwards into enemies. These stickmen drop one that lets you upgrade your puny default punch and kick. Eventually, if you survive for long enough, you fight a boss and complete the game. If this premise sounds vaguely familiar, it might be because I turned it into a prototype made in Unity last year. I even kept the same character. After Deck Dojo, I felt empowered to make an even more complex game, Scratch Bash, which I considered my magnum opus at the time. The result of multiple months of work, Scratch Bash is a Mario Party-style minigame collection with 10 different minigames and 3 different styles of board game with multiple variations. And since you only need 2 buttons to play, it even supports 4 players with working CPUs to fill in the gaps. After all that, it's currently sitting at 51 views. But surprisingly, I wasn't all that broken up. I didn't care that nobody played it. I made an awesome game, and that, to me, was just as fulfilling as getting famous. As my ability to work on larger games increased, and my mindset improved, I came across a very interesting opportunity. A group of Scratchers called the Scralaxy team. This is a team of developers who utilize the Remix feature, where you can edit somebody else's project and add new features, to make huge collaborative fan games, starting with the massive Super Mario Scralaxy, a 2D demake drawing on all the eras of the Mario franchise. The project has been going for years and is starting to get close to completion, but there are several younger projects, some of which I was pretty interested in. So I applied to join the team, using Scratch Bash as an example project, and I was approved to make an update for Super Mario Scratchy World. I added a functional version of the Cat Bell power-up and had the update out in only a few hours, and this project blew up, at least for me, getting over 800 views. This, for me, was the real breakthrough, the value proposition of working with a team. I could focus on what was fun for me, coding new features, and and the high-profile nature of the team meant that all of my updates got plenty of views, and working on these large-scale projects inspired me to make a more long-term project of my own, another fan game that I would call Donkey Kong Country Returns. I developed it using a similar update system to the Skralaxy Team games, where I would work on an update on my computer, then upload it to the website. Unlike the Skralaxy games though, everything, apart from some of the art later on, and about half of the music, was done by me. Also unlike the Skralaxy games, I had a working prototype for the first update, rather than just a menu screen or debug level. In that prototype phase, I developed the core platforming engine and the iconic buddy system seen in the Donkey Kong Country games, where you can switch out your Kongs and use their different abilities. Although, personally I use Diddy whenever possible since his jetpack is extremely useful. Throughout several months I completed the first world for the game, which includes 5 unique levels. The first is a fairly straightforward jungle level, and the second introduces some bouncy clouds. This one also uses original retro-style music instead of downloaded Donkey Kong music. The third level takes place underground with falling stalactites, and the fourth kicks it up a notch with a giant robot chase scene. Finally, the fifth level is a short boss fight followed by a cutscene. Oh, did I mention there are cutscenes? You probably get the point by now. In terms of content alone, this was certainly my biggest Scratch project yet. It's nothing life-changing, but from what I've seen, I would call it one of the more impressive Donkey Kong fan games on Scratch. Hey, don't clap too hard, you'll hurt your hands. And surprisingly, it's sitting at almost 6,000 views, being one of my most successful projects yet, even though it doesn't have the boost of the Skralaxy team behind it. People must just love Donkey Kong. But let's check in on second greatest. When I wasn't making huge fan games, I was using this alt account to participate in the Object Show community. If you're not familiar, Object Shows are a genre of animation that started with Battle for Dream Island, a web cartoon featuring a cast of anthropomorphic objects in a Survivor-style game show. Throughout the years, there have been hundreds of other shows inspired by BFDI, but the Object Show tradition has broadened into a lot of other forms, including on Scratch. Plenty of people made their own object shows, but some also made object camps, where other users submitted their own object characters to compete against each other. I participated in 1 or 2 of these myself, and even hosted one. As part of my Object Show enthusiasm, I also had an idea for a game called Object Show Maker. I mean, Object Show doesn't even sound like a word anymore. I guess it wasn't a word, it was 2 words. Anyway, you drew your objects using Scratch's built-in pen blocks, and the game puppeteered them. I made a quick demo in a day or 2 that was hilariously bare bones, with only 1 contest and literally 6 things the objects could say. And once again, it blew up. Also, a quick note on popularity here. 6,000 views may not seem like that many, this video probably has more than that, but Scratch is a much smaller platform with almost no personalized recommendations. The only way people can find this project is through the search bar, or if somebody they follow happens to like it. There's even a spontaneous community of people in the comments of this project posting the results of their made-up object shows. It's very heartwarming, and it teaches us yet another lesson. If you want people to interact with your projects, build a community. That's the same thing that happened with Skralaxy Team. Now, I hadn't fully learned that lesson myself. Back on Scratch the Greatest, I made plenty of projects that were just me trying to capitalize on my newfound audience. A tier list of all my projects, an OC contest that only got 3 entries, and a few other ancillary projects. I kept making updates for the various Skralaxy Team games, eventually becoming one of the more respected members as the pace of each game began to slow. Scranimate was an animation software that was a fun experiment but not much else. Mario Clash 25 was another contest entry, a spiritual successor to this old Virtual Boy game. It utilized a pseudo 3D effect and a pretty complicated entity system to make it so that, for example, Koopa shells would knock over enemies. At this point I was working on Wing It, my first major Unity game, so I could handle some more complex systems. Then a very interesting opportunity opened up in the Skralaxy Team, a new game called Super Scratch Bros. Scrolltimate. The first version had been made, but it was just a demo, featuring a menu screen but no real gameplay. I volunteered to make the actual platform fighter engine over several months in 2021, even putting up a public checklist of all the features. Pretty soon, SSBS V0.0.2 was released. It only had 1 playable character, but it had all the moves you'd expect in a full Smash game, along with an extensible animation system. It took all my years of experience to make an engine this complex, and it's so huge now that so far I'm the only one who's been able to do anything with it in 3 years. I've made a couple updates to it in the years since I've put out V0.0.2, but nothing major. At the time I released that project, I was just starting work on Breezy, and Unity games at school would take up my time from then on. So that's where my Scratch journey ends. Not with a bang, but with a... No, yeah, it was with a bang. I made some pretty good projects. And more importantly, I learned some valuable lessons. I think the main ones are these. First, have a consistent brand. I know it might seem tough to have to keep up this image, but it really pays off, at least in my experience. Even today, I keep up the Mondobi brand because it motivates me to make great videos and games. But that leads to the next lesson. Share everything, even the half-baked demos and the low-quality projects. We saw that with Second Greatest, where the most unexpected projects got the most views. And I'm still sharing prototypes like Deck Dojo and Sudama that I only spent a month on. Just make sure to be honest that these are half-baked and not your usual content, and people will understand. Next, focus on your strengths and let everyone else pick up your weaknesses. We saw that with the Scralaxy team, where I got to do plenty of programming and other people contributed art and marketing. For everything you don't want to do, there's someone else out there who wants to do it for you. And finally, don't make fame your #1 goal. Do what you're passionate about, and if people gain value from it, they'll stick around. These lessons also apply to game dev in general, whether you're using Scratch, Unity, or anything else. So I hope that wherever you are in your game dev journey, they'll be of use to you. But we're not here to talk about you. We're here to talk about me, and next month we'll answer the question of whether or not these lessons stuck. We'll be looking at my first few Unity games, ending with my first major release, Wing It. Have a good day.